Welcome to Doctoral Residency. I'm Dr. Joel Domingo of the School of Applied Leadership, and this presentation covers the 15-point Prospectus tool, your key to alignment. I want to congratulate you first of all on getting this far in the program. You have made it through the coursework phase of the program and successfully completed your comprehensive exam, so that is quite an accomplishment. So here you are about to start the dissertation process. It's a long process to get the doctorate, but you've made it this far, and so congratulations first and foremost. What we're going to do in this module, in this session, is we'll cover three things. The first is we'll talk about this Prospectus tool and why you even need it. In doctoral research and dissertation writing, one of the first steps that students do is do a thing called a prospectus, and then a proposal, and then the dissertation, of course. We'll find out those are all three parts of the same thing, but the first thing is the prospectus, and we call our phase of the prospectus tool. The second thing is we'll break down each component of this tool, and I'll give you some tips and tricks to complete that. I'll cover some things to look for, some things to note, and so as you go through this presentation, feel free to stop and pause as well, because I know you'll get a lot of benefit out of this. And finally, just some final tips about this word called alignment. Alignment's a word that we use in doctoral dissertation writing that is critical, and at this phase of the dissertation, alignment is the most critical piece. So I mentioned that you're now at the start line and you're about to begin this fantastic journey called dissertation, and I found this image of a road that has track lanes. And my daughter runs track, and so I'm familiar with these track lanes, and I've seen these a lot. But this is a great image because the doctoral dissertation is in fact a journey. It's an ebbing and flowing of ideas, going back and forth, and trying to figure out what exactly am I writing about. And so if you think of the doctoral dissertation writing, and you look at this road, there are lanes here to get started. So, you know, lanes 1 to 8 in any track. Looks like there's 7 on this one. But in any case, you're looking down at the road and it has lanes. And alignment ensures that you stay in your lane. Again, if you've ever run track, you can get disqualified for going out of your lane in certain events. And the dissertation, it's very similar, that you want to stay in the lane. You're going to have ups and downs and twists and turns throughout this writing, but alignment is going to be key. And so when you start aligned and continue on writing your dissertation aligned, things are going to go so much better. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. So the dissertation, what is it? It's an original study of significant size and important. It's a document that helps you create or discover new knowledge. It's unique. It's the only one that's ever going to be written in the specific subject area in the specific way. So it also advances the field in a significant way, whether that's business or education, leadership, whatnot. They are so unique. The dissertation addresses a significant problem in the student's field that has not been addressed. And this is going to be important because what we're talking about here is problem-based research. We'll get into that a bit. What's the difference between problem-based research and basic research? But problem-based research. The dissertation delivers knowledge that can be used by others. One of the neat things about your dissertation is that other researchers and future dissertation students, for example, are going to use your work once you've written it and perhaps even cite it, which is really neat. Okay, just in terms of the important people, obviously we can't reiterate enough, your chair is the most important person in your dissertation process. Obviously you are writing the dissertation, but the chair and the committee have useful knowledge in the field that you're going to be doing your study in. And so contact is made between you, the student, and the chair. You need to set goals for the term, and you must meet the goals in order to pass. In fact, the dissertation handbook has specific criteria on what passing is and that you have to have regular contact with your chair, to have attendance counted, to show up, to contact your chair on a weekly basis. So again, there is a lot of criteria needed to pass. But as you go through the coursework, you'll see. I love this image because the dissertation is iterative, meaning it goes back and forth, and the way it works is that the student, you submit a document to your chair, the chair and the committee reads it for content and sends it back to the student. The student says, okay, let me address this, and then sends it back to the chair sends it back, and forth you go. And when the chair is finally satisfied with your prospectus, we're talking about the prospectus here, the document will then go to the committee. First of all, it then goes to the dissertation director, but then goes to the committee as an FYI. So again, the whole key to this is that you and your chair are going to work closely to get the prospectus done. Now, dissertation chapters. Here at CityU, we have a standard 5-chapter dissertation, and you'll see the components of it here. The first component is your introduction, and these correspond to the chapters, by the way. The second chapter is your literature review. The third chapter, chapter 3, is your methodology. Chapter 4 is going to be your findings, your results, and chapter 5 is your discussion or conclusion. Here at CityU, we call the prospectus. The prospectus is really the 15-part tool that ensures alignment. In some universities, the prospectus is just that, an idea. It is what you think. And so it is the same thing here. We just do it in a format that you don't have to write it out like a dissertation. We just use a table, and I'll show you that table here in this presentation. But the proposal is the first 3 chapters of your dissertation. So introduction, literature review, and methodology, that is what's known as the proposal. So that proposal needs to be approved before a person conducts their research. And the research happens to get the data collection, etc. Once the data collection is done, then the student writes chapters 4 and 5, and the whole thing altogether is called a dissertation. So remember, prospectus is just the idea. It's the tool to ensure alignment, to get the ideas lined up. The proposal, chapters 1 to 3, and then the dissertation is all the chapters together. So you can think of it, the proposal is part of your dissertation. All right, let's talk about the 15 parts of the tool. Now the tool, the prospectus tool, is your initial outline. It helps keep you on track, and you can refer back and forth to it throughout the entire process. The items are listed on this prospectus tool in the order that they'll be completed. And so again, I've mentioned this word alignment. The tool helps you ensure alignment. And you might have a hard copy of it, but this is the copy of it here. You see on this slide that there's 15 parts to the tool. And we'll go over this. I'll go over each part and show you what's needed. In essence, what you submit at the end of this prospectus phase is that you submit a completed table to your chair. The chair looks it over, sends it to the dissertation director of dissertation research, make sure it's good, and then you move forward to writing your proposal. Okay. Now, students ask me, do I have to do both? How is it going to do? If you do your prospectus right, you can lift the language that you use on the prospectus tool to the proposal. And I'll talk about that in a bit. But let's start with the first component, which is the topic. Now, the topic is what you're interested in. It's the general dissertation topic. It should be 2 to 3 sentences. So, for example, the topic is first-generation college students. Pretty broad, but hey, that's a topic. Another one is addressing the achievement or educational opportunity gap in middle school students. Okay, that's a topic. Great. So again, why are you interested in the topic? Think about that. Think about what questions you have about something. Why is it interesting to you? Why is leadership in this specific aspect, interesting? My story is that when I was developing my topic, I had been involved in the K-12 arena, and I was doing some advocacy. And so what I had been involved with was helping families get involved in their children's education. And it was great, and I started looking up research on this idea of family engagement in education. It was in family partnerships. Then my dissertation chair told me, like, why are you interested in this? Like, well, because I can get it done. And he said, that's not good enough. Think about what really moves you, what motivates you in this topic. Well, then I said, it motivates me because my kid's in school. Well, that's great, but why does it really motivate you? What he was getting at was this idea, to what end? What's the bigger question? For me, it wasn't just about families being involved in education. It was more about what are the motivations for people to get involved in any sort of volunteer or civic activity in the first place. That was the root behind it, not necessarily the effect, but the root behind it was what he was looking for. That was my topic, and so my dissertation ended up being something different in a subject altogether, but the heart of it was the motivation. I did use the family engagement in education literature as part of it, but it really helped me. So think about what things you're interested in, and maybe you have some things now and maybe you don't, and that's okay. Think about these things. The next section, this is a big section in the table, is the literature review. Now, the literature review is different from a review of the literature. And so the literature review, let me first of all cover what are the things that are included in this second section, some of the background of the problem that you're going to research, the gap in the literature, the need for the study based on the citations in the literature. You're going to have theoretical foundations. What are some of the models and theories to be the foundation? Who are some of those seminal authors? A review of the literature topics, or the key themes for each one. And again, I mentioned gaps. Are there gaps in the literature review? Meaning that you've looked up the literature and you found something on your topic, but then you notice that, hey, all these researchers looked at this one area. Why didn't they look at this other area? And had they looked at this area, they would have addressed the problem in a different way. That's what you're looking for. That's a literature review. And so part of it is including the key theories. Well, what are the key theories that you will be advancing in your research? Maybe it's a theory of leadership. Maybe it's you're helping advance some of the work in transformational leadership, and Kouzes and Posner are going to go there. Whose work will you advance by conducting your own research? So by doing this research, are you contributing to this theory of leadership? Are you contributing to that theory of business, for example? What will be the theoretical and or conceptual framework that will guide your study? So are there any constructs? Culture, Edgar Schein, for example. Maybe you're thinking about the construct of cultural diffusion or cultural competence. Maybe there's a framework there that you're looking at for your study. Critical race theory, whatever it is, be sure you include that in the literature. So that's part of the second part, which is the literature review. Now, the next section in your prospectus table is a thing called the problem statement. And the problem statement has two parts. It has a general problem and a specific problem. I have this quote here, is that it's not usually hard to find solutions once you understand the problem. The whole key to your dissertation is understanding what the problem is. And this is probably the biggest area of challenge for dissertation students, is how do you define your problem? How can you make it specific enough that it's not broad and that it's addressable, it's researchable, and it's dissertation worthy? Now, a problem is something that you want to look at that the literature says it's a problem. A problem is, it's important that you think a problem, it's important when we say it's a problem that you don't think it's a problem, but it's demonstrated that it is a problem. So for example, a bug infestation in my house, well, that's a problem. And that may be a problem for you, but the literature may not say it's a problem. You may think it's a problem. And so think about, based on what? Based on what evidence do you see that the problem? So back to the bug infestation example. Yeah, well, because my house is rotting. Well, okay, that's sad, and you got to address that, and that's unfortunate. But that may not be a big enough problem to address in a dissertation. Okay, so the point is, it has to be based on the literature. Does the literature say it's a problem? So with that, there's a general problem statement. The general problem is a larger problem in the field. You want to describe the general problem based on the gaps in the literature. Again, what does the literature say? How does it indicate that this is a real problem, not one that you think it's a problem? So I've worked with dissertation students who said that, well, it's a problem in our district that teachers aren't prepared to handle the new wave of demographic changes. Well, that may be a problem in your district, but is it a real problem that's documented in the literature? Well, leaders at our school don't have good communication skills. Well, yes, that's true, but is it a real problem that's happening that's impacting schools in general, or do you just see it because it's a problem you have to deal with? Part of the general problem is that there's a specific localized problem. So how the larger problem is affecting a specific organization or population that can help. So the problem statement is what is the specific problem? There's a scope to this specific problem. Where or for whom will you be presenting this research problem? Who is affected by the problem if it's not solved at your specific context? Now, what I'm saying specific context, it doesn't have to be your specific workplace. It can be something that you're involved with. It's actually better that it's not your work situation, but it could be. If you're a business administration person in DBA, how is this problem connected to business? Why is this a problem, and how is it connected to business in the business literature? Now, if you're in the EDD program, we ask you, how is the problem connected to leadership? So there has to be a leadership component or an impact to your problem. It can't be just studying because it's interesting. It can't be just because you thought, wow, this would be fascinating to find out. But is it a problem? And how is it a leadership problem specifically? The next component of your prospectus is going to be the purpose statement. The purpose statement asks why you are doing this study. The purpose of the study is you would use those words on the dissertation prospectus table. The purpose of the study is to identify, explore, and understand, blah, blah, blah. That would be leaning toward a qualitative study. Perhaps the purpose of the study is to identify relationships, associations, predictions. It's to predict that. It's to identify the relationship between, that's a correlational study. Perhaps the purpose of the study is to establish cause and effect. This is where you'd see more experimental studies. You don't really see a lot of these, but you can, perhaps. Another one is the purpose of the study is to assess an impact. It's to assess the effectiveness of this leadership program on something. So that's an evaluation study. So the purpose statement keeps you aligned with how does the study address the problem. Okay, so you have a problem, but how is the study going to address that problem? Is it going to just talk about it some more? Is it going to come up with a solution? Is it going to determine if something is related? So you see how those two are aligned. There's a problem, and that your purpose helps address the problem. Now, this leads you toward the research questions, which is the next section in the table. The research question says, are the actual research questions that you have. So quantitative, qualitative hypothesis is done in quantitative means for qualitative qualities of a case. Mixed methods, yeah, I say in jest don't do it, but the reality is mixed methods are great. I say that in jest because it's a little bit more complex. I am not going to say you should not do it. I am going to suggest you do whatever you feel best that addresses your problem. So don't take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, I encourage you to do whatever you want, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. Just know that in mixed methods, you have to do both types. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's just as valid for a study. Now, the significance of the study is what's the value benefit of your study? Who will be better off? What do you expect the people to know, do, or understand because you're doing the study? How do you expect the study to advance the field? And whose work will you be advancing through your work? So here's a way to say it. By exploring this aspect of leadership, for example, leaders at school districts will be able to implement strategies to address the changing demographic shifts. Okay, there you go. That's the significance of the study. So it's because you did your study, what's going to happen? What's the impact? That's what the significance is. Methodology and design is really about your specific methodology for your research. So again, how does this methodology address the problem statement? So let's say you wanted to explore the relationship between a certain variable in business. You want to explore the relationship between buyers and sellers at car dealerships, and what leaders do to produce higher sales. If you chose if you said you wanted to study that, but then said my methodology will be to survey someone, when in fact you wanted to look at a relationship. If you're looking at a relationship, that implies that you're doing a correlational study, whereas if you're just doing a case study, for example, that's different. So you want to make sure your methodology lines up with your question. Your problem, purpose, and methodology need to be aligned. And so the key to alignment are the words that you choose and the specificity by which you write that. Okay, that's going to be important. So if it's quantitative, what type of data analysis or statistical measures will be used? If you have a qualitative study, what type of qualitative strategy will be used? Are you going to do a case study? Is it a phenomenology? Is it a grounded theory? So you have to decide that. And support your decision with citations from appropriate research reference texts. So this is saying don't just choose it because you think it's cool or because you like the way that it's easy or that this cool author, I like the author and so I'm going to use that. That's great, but support your decisions. Why is it important for you to do this using a quantitative method? Well, because so-and-so, because I have variables, because I'm looking at certain conditions, etc. Okay, just give a reason why. The other thing too, know your references. Okay, so you all have taken the research set, and so, or many of you have, know your research. So if you're going to do qualitative inquiry, Cresswell and Patton are great. If you're going to do research design in terms of case study, well, Yin is good. Phenomenology, you're going to mention a guy named Weigel, perhaps, maybe Moustakas. Grounded theory, you're going to do Shermaz. If you're going to do quantitative research, you're going to refer to your Salkin book. So just know some of the authors that help you defend or give you rationale behind the methodology. Now your population and sample is your next section in the prospectus table, and the population and sample should be who are going to be your participants. Identify the participants, identify your population. My population is going to be all engineers who were born between 1950 and 1960, for example. Or my population is all first generation college bilingual students in X college. So be clear about how your sample represents the larger population that will be impacted. So if you're going to do a study on first generation college students and all of a sudden you are interviewing their parents, well, that may not be the right sample that's representative of your population. Data collection is the next section. How are you going to collect the data? What instruments are you going to use? Are you going to address the problem through collecting data on a survey? Are you going to do your research with face-to-face interviews? What type of instruments are you going to use? Are you going to do an interview that you have questions that you create or questions that are already created? And then how are you going to validate those questions? So just think about that. Next section is going to be related is data analysis. So data analysis is you're going to describe the specific analysis approaches that you're going to use. Each of the data collection and data analysis items should map directly to the research questions. Again, alignment is key. So how are you going to do this? Are you going to hand code? Are you going to code and come up with themes? Are you going to use a computer? If you're going to code a qualitative survey, are you going to use SPSS? If you're going to do quantitative, be specific about that. Okay. Trustworthiness is another way of saying validity. Describe the steps you will take to measure reliability and internal-external validity in a quantitative study. And dependability, credibility, transferability are the equivalent in a qualitative study. So describe how you're going to ensure that stuff. Are you going to cross-check it? Are you going to have your interviews transcribed by somebody else? I recommend you do that. How are you going to make sure the data is coded right? So discuss all those things. Limitations. This is the stuff that you cannot control. Okay, what are the unavoidable limitations that are likely to be placed on your study by circumstances? What are those things that limit the scope, reach, and generalizability of your results? So some of the limitations are, these are third, not fourth grade, or parents of third, not fourth grade students. Okay, these are first generation students, not second generation students. So what are the limitations that are placed on your study by circumstances? Stuff that you as the researcher cannot control. This is different from the delimitations, which are the conditions that you set on the study. So where, with whom, that you impose on the researcher. What limits or parameters are you placing specifically? I'm limiting my study to only students within Washington State versus students nationally. That's a delimitation. I'm limiting my study to three teachers in fourth grade teachers. I'm only looking at this one specific school, and I'm not looking at the entire district. I'm only looking at this one area, this department of the business, and not the entire business. Okay, I'm only looking at left-handed leaders and not right-handed leaders. So you get the idea. Delimitations, you impose that, you get to choose. These may impact the validity or generalizability, but know that you as the researcher get to choose which boundary conditions you want to set for your study. All right, the summary statement, this is the end, this is number 15, is a one-sentence statement of purpose that includes the problem statement, the methodology, design, population, and location. Here's an example. The purpose of this qualitative phenomenological study is to explore the problem of doctoral students finishing their prospectus by examining the lived experience of 15 doctoral students at CityU who are working on their dissertations. So that is a purpose statement. Think of this as your 15-second elevator speech, perhaps 10-second elevator speech. 15 seconds might be too tall, a really tall building, but nonetheless, this is a short statement that summarizes the table. Okay? So, after you go through this, and again, I encourage you to pause, go back and look at the slides. The Prospectus tool, the handout, has some great tips on there. It's pretty much what we've covered here, but alignment, again, alignment is so critical. Proper alignment. The problem statement must be grounded in the literature. The problem has to be a real problem. It's not a made-up problem. Here's one thing that I see a lot with dissertations is that the problem is that there's no new knowledge. No study has done this. Well, that's not a problem. It's just no studies have done this. Has to be a problem. So not knowing something, lacking knowledge about something, That's not a problem. Okay, the research questions must align with the data needed to solve, begin, or address the problem. Alignment. The methodology and design must be appropriate for the problem. The data collection and data analysis must provide the information to answer the questions or to test the hypothesis. So again, if you're going to answer the research questions, that's usually the qualitative. Test the hypotheses, that's quantitative. The point to all this is that alignment is critical. I mentioned earlier this idea of basic versus applied research, and that basic research is essentially generating new knowledge to advance a chosen field, whereas applied research is generating and applying new knowledge in pursuit of the solution of a problem in the chosen field. We are doing applied knowledge here. Okay, here's a chart. So you see that the type of research, there's applied versus basic. So in applied research, the problem statement is so-and-so. So you will actually see on dissertations, the problem is, versus in basic research, what is the impact of X? How does Y, how does the insertion of a mitochondrial 23 gene affect metabolism? That's basic research. Doesn't mean it's worse or better, it just means that's the type of research it is. In applied research, the research is designed to address the problem, whereas in basic research, it's just to know more stuff, to gather data and information to try to answer the research questions. The scope of the applied research is specific to the problem or setting. In basic research, it can be more general if the research question is general. So what's the impact of television on adolescent minds? That's basic research. Examples ends with a period, ends with a question mark. So applied research says, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the research done. Whereas basic research is like, okay, this is great, but now what? And applied research has this component too. The key in creating new knowledge by addressing a problem that has not been addressed the same way, the resolution shows others how to resolve the problem in the same way. In basic research, by providing new general knowledge, it advances the field, and other research can use further advance for research or for practical reasons. So basic and applied are somewhat related, but the key is looking at basic research doesn't address a specific problem, whereas applied is. So let me give you some examples that might clarify this. So here's some basic research. The research question is how undergraduate GPAs correlate to the scores on the GMAT and subsequent admission to business graduate programs. The research designed a study that correlates a relationship between two variables in order to provide a general answer to a general question. Doesn't require actions beyond just answering the question. The research here doesn't have to solve a problem because there might not even be a problem. This is just, okay, this is interesting. That may not be a problem, but it's interesting to study and it's dissertation worthy in some institutions. Let me give you an applied example. The problem is that potential graduate students in Washington State are collectively scoring among the lowest in the nation on the GMAT. And this is impacting their admission to business graduate programs. That's a problem. So the research design is the student would design a project where the researcher examines the cause of the problem and proposes any actions that can be taken to address the cause in order to resolve or minimize the problem. Again, specific context, specific topic. This is a problem, okay? It's applied research. Now, review the Prospectus tool. Where do you start? Take a look at it. I encourage you again, stop and pause at any point of this presentation. You want to identify the problem, the purpose, the questions, know your literature, your theories. The Prospectus tool ensures alignment. That's, if any one word you just think of this entire presentation, it's about alignment. It's all about that alignment. Keep revising it until it is right. It's iterative. So alignment, you see that alignment is key. Again, you want to use this tool to go through your prospectus be thorough, go back and forth with your chair. Some chairs will say just take a first stab at everything. Some chairs will say let's just focus on the first 3 sections and then let's worry about the next section. But alignment is the most critical thing at this stage. So at this point, I wanted to thank you for listening to the presentation. I'll know if you have questions. Please send them to the instructor. And once again, thank you for listening.